everyone, and welcome to the Huston-Brumbaugh Nature Center. My name is Adam Zorn. I'm the program manager here for the Nature Center, and today I'm standing outside the bird observatory. For those of you who have been to the Nature Center and have been inside the visitor center, you're familiar with the bird observatory as the large round room with all of the big windows that looks out into this garden where I'm standing today. You can see the bird feeders behind me, and this is the appropriate setting to talk about basic bird feeding. Basic bird feeding involves just a few things, and you will have a lot of success with setting up a new bird feeding station or perhaps rejuvenating an old bird feeding station if you follow just a few simple tips I'm going to share with you today. So the first tip is to figure out what kind of bird feeders do you want. There are many different types of bird feeders, and there are lots of different styles. They come in lots of different colors. They're made out of many different types of materials, but there are a handful of basic varieties of bird feeders. So let's start with probably the most common that many people think of, which are the tube-shaped bird feeders, or sometimes referred to as silo bird feeders. So here I have a typical tube feeder. Tube feeders can be many different sizes. They can be really short, they can be really tall, they can also be really wide in diameter and hold a lot of bird seed. They all function basically the same way. They have feeding ports where birds can get access to the food, and they oftentimes have perches next to those ports where the birds can sit and comfortably get access to the food. Tube-shaped feeders come in two different varieties. So I've got two different here. They're similar in size, but you'll notice one has very large holes, the other, it's probably difficult to see, the other has very small holes. There are little tiny holes inside of this tube feeder. And that's because they're meant for different types of seeds, which we'll talk about in a moment. Another common type of bird feeder is the hopper feeder. They oftentimes look kind of like a little house, and these are referred to as hopper style bird feeders. These hold a lot of bird seed, so that can be a convenience for some people. You can put a couple different varieties of seed in here as well, which might also be a convenience. So hopper style bird feeders, like we have here. This one happens to be made of wood. You can find them made of metal and of plastic materials as well. The last, what I consider to be basic bird feeder that many people will go out and purchase is a Suet Cage. So this is just a simple cage that is meant to open, and you can put a special type of food that you can purchase called suet, a cake, and that will fit right inside of the cage, and you close the cage and then you can hang it. We like to hang these in this orientation here so that the birds feed on the bottom side of the suet. Many people will hang them in this orientation as well, so they could see birds feeding from both sides if you leave the suet cake outside of the packaging. So suet cages are a third very common style of bird feeder. Now a fourth style of bird feeder that you can either purchase, or many times people just simply make them, is a platform feeder. A platform feeder can be anything as simple as a board held up off the ground with maybe something like bricks or some other pieces of wood, and you sprinkle seed onto that feeder. It's a platform with an open surface area for birds to sit and eat seeds. We have some platform feeders here at the Nature Center. There's one behind me on the corner of the fence. We have a couple of them on the fences in different areas around the bird observatory. They're just open platforms where birds can land directly on it and see all the food that's there and pick the piece they want and fly away. So platform feeders are really simple bird feeders that can be made, but you can also purchase them, and they typically go on or near the ground, or they can be attached like ours are to a fence to provide a big open area for larger birds to sit and eat. Now, those are the types of feeders. Once you pick a feeder, then you need to pick the right food that goes into that feeder. So let's go back to our tube style bird feeders. This is the first one I showed you. It has these large holes where the birds can gain access to the food. These feeders with these types of large openings are best filled with black oil sunflower seed. Sunflower seeds come in many different shapes and sizes. The black oil sunflower seeds, however, are the best to put in these tube feeders. They're small sunflowers, they're black, just like the name indicates, and they have thin shells. They're relatively easy to open for many species of birds. They have a really good nutritional content, and there's really no wasted space inside the shell. So when the bird is opening one of these, they're getting a really good morsel of food inside. There are other varieties of sunflower seeds available. They are typically mixed into other foods. So that's where our mixed bird seed might come into play. I do not advise putting mixed bird seed into tube style feeders. Most of the birds are going to want the little black oil sunflowers out of here. A few birds might want the large striped sunflowers, and they're going to kick everything else out of the feeder and toss it all over the ground trying to get to those two varieties of sunflower seeds. So put your single black oil seed inside of this style of tube feeder. Now you may remember there was another style of tube feeder, this one here. The openings on this style of feeder are very small. So any of these tube style feeders with very small openings are not going to accommodate large seeds like the sunflower seeds. You're going to need to fill this with a different variety of seed. I would recommend filling this with thistle, or sometimes it's marketed as Niger seed. It's very teeny tiny seeds. It looks like really thin miniature grains of rice, except they're black in color, and they are meant for this style of bird feeder. If you accidentally pour Niger seed into this bird feeder, it will just come gushing out of the holes and spill everywhere and make a large mess on the ground. So if you're going to feed the thistle or Niger seed, make sure you get an appropriate bird feeder to accommodate that seed. This type of food is attractive to goldfinches. A few other varieties of finches, like house finches, will pick at the thistle or Niger seeds. And we get occasional winter visitors called pine siskins who also enjoy the very teeny tiny seeds that you will put into this type of a bird feeder. Now, when it comes to filling your hopper feeder, if you choose a feeder of this style here, you can see ours is filled with black oil sunflower seed. However, you can put mixed seed into this style of bird feeder. Because this feeder has a large sort of tray where the birds can come and sit, they can see the sunflower seeds they want if they're a bird who wants sunflower seeds. And they won't generally pick and scratch through this as much and throw as much food onto the ground. So I would recommend using black oil sunflower in this type of a feeder, but you can put mixed seed into hopper feeders as well. Mixed seed is great for platform feeders. So those big open feeders, it could be a piece of plywood on the ground, held up off the ground by a couple of bricks, or the small ones that we made on our fence here. In any case, that's where your mixed seed comes in handy. Okay, you can just sprinkle a little bit of mixed seed onto your platform feeder, and the birds can come down and grab what they want. So the chickadees can see the black oil, they can grab that without kicking everything else onto the ground and making a mess out of it. The same with the doves. They will want to pick out the things like the cracked corn and the millet, and any unshelled sunflower seeds that might be in here. The mourning doves, the sparrows, like your song sparrows, dark-eyed juncos in the wintertime, they can find those smaller seeds amongst the larger sunflower seeds and pull them out very easily. So mixed seed is great for open platform feeders and possibly your hopper feeders as well. Now if you're going to feed suet, you're going to be buying suet cakes. You need to outfit the suet, or put the suet cakes into a suet cage. It's not a great idea to leave this out in the open on its own. You will want to make sure that it goes into a cage. Here at the Nature Center, we like to feed these, as I mentioned earlier, so that the suet is only open on one side and it's facing down. So if I pull the label off of this suet cake, now it's open and accessible to the birds. They can eat from here. I will stick it in to the cage, close it up, And when we hang it, now the birds will feed from the bottom side. The top side still has the plastic material on it that the wet hot suet was poured into, and that keeps large birds like crows, grackles, starlings, and some other larger, less acrobatic species from eating your suet. And it lets the woodpeckers, the chickadees, the titmice, the nuthatches, it still allows them access to the suet by feeding on the bottom of the cage. And it sort of mimics some of their natural feeding styles that way too, which is, I think helpful. It's a little bit of enrichment for the birds that come to your bird feeders. So now that you know about bird feeders and the bird food that's best to put in them, there are a few other things that you should think about when setting up a new bird feeding station or potentially reviving an old abandoned bird feeding station. Something else that you may want to consider adding to your feeding station is water. Water sources are really good attractants. They will bring the birds in sometimes even before the food draws them in. It's still fall. There's plenty of food in our forest right now, and there's not a lot of bird feeding activity at the bird feeders. The birds are foraging out in the habitat. However, our water feature that we have here continually draws attention to it. The moving water in the waterfall, the pond where the water it sits, are all attractive places for birds to get drinks and to take baths. Now, you may not be interested in creating a water feature. It may be too much of an undertaking. At my house, I don't have a water feature. I have a bird bath. It's a shallow dish that holds just a small amount of water, and I make sure that I keep that full and that I keep it clean, and that's more than enough for the birds at my house. They are definitely enjoying that, take baths in it, and get lots of drinks during all parts of the year. Water is going to be really important going into winter, and so if you can keep your water feature moving like we do here at the Nature Center with the waterfall, that will prevent the water from freezing. If you use a bird bath, you can get a bird bath heater, which is a very low temperature heater. It typically has a thermostat built into it, so it will keep the water frozen, but it's not going to heat it up and turn it into a sauna either. And so those are great additions to your bird bath, is if you invest in a bird bath heater, and that will keep your bird bath open and available to the birds all winter long so that they can find unfrozen water to both drink and bathe in. Now, placement of your bird feeders. We're fortunate here at the Nature Center to have all kinds of vegetation around us. We're surrounded by forest here at the Visitor Center, and so we're in a little bit of an opening. Birds are drawn to this area naturally, and so it just made a great spot to put bird feeders. In your backyard, you should probably think about, well, where would birds be attracted naturally even without these bird feeders? Typically that's near a tree or a shrub or a hedgerow, some sort of vegetation where the birds can stand and cautiously look around, sort of pay attention to their surroundings, and then go out and land on your bird feeder. It's also a spot where they can grab a seed from the feeder and go back to that same place and eat it, and they'll make many trips back and forth. So putting your bird feeding station somewhere adjacent to, doesn't have to be right up against, in fact it probably shouldn't be right against vegetation, but within a short distance of vegetation is going to give you the best chance of attracting birds in a relatively short period of time. Also think about, where are you going to enjoy your bird feeders? Think about the window that you look out most frequently, or the chair that you sit in most frequently, where you can enjoy these bird feeders. Here at the Nature Center we have a whole room dedicated to the bird feeding area. Maybe you have a sunroom or another area dedicated to viewing the outdoors. That would be a perfect place to put your bird feeder. Other places to consider might be outside of a living room window where you and your family spend a lot of time. My bird feeders at home are actually where I can see them out the kitchen. We're in the kitchen frequently. We make all of our meals in the kitchen. Out the window right above the sink is where I can look when I'm doing dishes or preparing meals. And so mine are in my backyard where I can easily see them through the kitchen windows. And so think about that when you're setting up your bird feeders. You want to enjoy these. And you want to make sure that you're sort of monitoring and paying attention to all the different types of birds that are visiting. So that'll be really important when it comes to placement. Now, you're probably thinking, all right, what about the squirrels? And that is definitely a consideration. What about the squirrels? Even if you don't have squirrels yet, you probably will after you start feeding the birds. The squirrels will show up, the chipmunks will show up after the birds do. And it's something that you'll have to deal with. And the easiest way to deal with it is to be proactive about it. So when it comes to squirrels, squirrels are very acrobatic, they're very good climbers, they're very good jumpers, and they have a lot of time to figure out how to get onto a bird feeder. So a couple of basics to think about when it comes to squirrels. Number one, you want to always make sure that wherever your bird feeder is hung, you have a baffle. Baffles are really important. We have baffles on our bird feeding posts here behind me. We have a short baffle on this one, a short baffle on this one. Some of the others have really long baffles that nearly touch the ground and go towards the top of the pole. These baffles are going to keep the squirrels from climbing up the pole and getting onto the bird feeders, which is really easy access for them. Okay, so invest in a good baffle or make a good baffle. The baffles behind me are made out of stovepipe. You can purchase baffles at the same places that you purchase bird seed and bird food. You can also put a baffle over top of your bird feeder. So many of our bird feeders are outfitted with baffles like this. So if a squirrel happens to get down, it makes it difficult now for them to come down this way onto the bird feeder. These also work really well to protect your bird feeders from the weather as well. So they can be dual purpose. Another consideration is placement. Again, think about how squirrels behave in the wild. They can climb up, they can jump from the ground, they can jump horizontally, and they can also drop down onto things from heights above the ground as well. So you need to remember the 6, 8, and 10 rule. Try to keep your bird feeder 6 feet above the ground. Try to keep your bird feeder 8 feet below any branches or any overhanging structures or branches. Okay, so you want 8 feet of space between the top of your bird feeder and whatever is above it. And then 10 feet of distance, horizontal distance, between your bird feeder and any other object that the squirrel could leap from. They're very good leapers. So the bird feeder over here, over my shoulder right here, is approximately 10 feet away from the tree that's in the background there. That big maple tree would be an easy place for a squirrel to launch a horizontal assault and try to grab onto the feeder or the pole that it's hanging from. 10 feet away is really going to limit that squirrel's ability. You're really stretching its physical feats. So 10 feet away horizontally, you'll keep squirrels from moving horizontally onto your bird feeders as well. Okay? A couple other questions I commonly get. When is a good time to start feeding birds? Anytime. Anytime you want is a good time to start. Fall is an excellent time to start. Birds are actively feeding in the environment around us, but they're also remembering food sources that they can rely on later when fall transitions to winter. So now's a great time to start feeding birds, but you can really start any time. Do you have to feed birds all year round is another question that I oftentimes get. And the answer is no, you do not have to feed birds all year round. Many people that I know only feed birds from fall through the winter and the early part of spring, and then they stop filling their bird feeders as summer approaches. So you don't need to fill your bird feeders all year round. You can fill them and maintain them for whatever period of time that you know you're going to be in your house, around your home, and be able to frequently enjoy the birds that are visiting. And then the last question I oftentimes get, especially for new people who are just starting, what if I don't see any birds right away? Well, that's likely to happen. New bird feeding stations are going to take a while to attract new customers. So you're going to have to show some patience. As long as you have fresh food out there and your feeders are in what the birds would consider to be a safe place, you will, over time, attract the attention of a chickadee or a titmouse or a nuthatch or a woodpecker. And once that first bird finds it, they will start to draw the attention of other birds, and you will slowly start to see the frequency of visits and the variety of birds visiting your feeder will go up and up and up after that first visit or first few visits to your new feeding station. All right, well, I hope this information is helpful. I encourage you to give bird feeding a try. Start small, one feeder, one food, see how it goes. If you're really excited about it and you're experiencing a lot of birds visiting, then you could try to branch out to one of these other styles of feeders and maybe introduce another type of food. If you have questions about feeding birds, please feel free to contact the Nature Center. We can be reached easily by phone or email, and you can leave us a message, and we're more than happy to talk to anybody about their bird feeding experiences. All right, thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope to see you out here on the trails one day at the Nature Center. Bye-bye.